Hello everyone, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. Today's case takes us all the way back to 2012. The story begins in a small town called Blairsville, which is in the northern part of the state of Georgia, right near the Tennessee border. It's a quiet town. Most people are very friendly, into the outdoors. People like to camp, hunt, and fish, and that was no different for Jeffrey Gebhardt, and that is who we are going to be talking about in today's video. Jeff, who also went by Pooh, like P-O-O-H, like the bear, and many of his close friends and family, was known to be a very kind man. He was very into the outdoors. He loved to hike, camp, fish, and hunt. These are some maps to give you an idea of where the town is, that red dot there in Georgia. This is a more centered view of where Blairsville is. Jeff was 35 years old at the time and was living with his parents. He was working at a meat packing plant in northern Blairsville. His whole family lived in the same town. He was very close with his mother and brother. In fact, his father often referred to them as if they were twins. They were so close. His mother was working as a registered nurse. Jeff was also very close with his father, and they often enjoyed hiking, camping, and hunting trips together. We don't really have a lot of information on Jeffrey's early life. We do know that he was born in Florida. However, he had moved back up to Georgia. He loved the area and the ability to go on these hunting, camping, and hiking trips. Jeffrey regularly attended church at the St. Francis Catholic Church in Blairsville. He was also a member of the Knights of Columbus fraternal organization. He was an avid outdoor runner. He loved staying in shape, and being fit was a very big and important part of his life. He loved to explore new places and go on new adventures. He had also always wanted to go back to school, and he had just recently enrolled in college classes to study computer science at the North College of Georgia. He was very excited about this. He talked to his mother and friends and family. They all said that he was just overjoyed and couldn't wait to get started, which these classes were almost about to start right before this incident happened. Earlier in late summer, he was invited to go on this very unique hunting trip with one of his friends. We'll call him Daryl. That's not his real name. Daryl was a former co-worker of his at the meatpacking industry plant. The reason this trip was different was because it was taking place roughly a month before the hunting season actually opened. It was a special program that people had to apply for. Only 286 hunters were allowed into the program, and Jeffrey and his friend Daryl were two of them. This was taking place at the Clarks Hill Wildlife Management Area, roughly 3 hours away from Blairsville to the south. This wildlife area is 12,700 acres. The hunters had to abide by certain rules and regulations, one of which was they couldn't start hunting until September 21st of that year, 2012. Jeffrey and his friend left on September 20th and headed down. They set up their camp at an area called Holiday Park. I'm going to have a map up here to show you a satellite view of the wildlife area and where Holiday Park Campground is. September 20th was a Thursday of that year. The men knew they couldn't start hunting until the next day, so they set up their Jayco camper that they were going to be staying in and got their gear ready. The next morning, they got an early start, but for some reason, they decided that they were going to split up. They both went in separate directions and headed out into the wildlife area to look for game. Their plan was to meet back at the campsite later that evening. Jeffrey somehow lost his way, got lost, and was calling his friend Daryl. He told him he was lost. Daryl told him to shoot his rifle into the air, which he did. Daryl apparently heard this shot, but roughly a few minutes later, some other hunters that were in the area came by, picked up Jeffrey, and dropped him back off at the campsite. The two men then just discussed their day. Neither of them had seen any deer or any other game, which they both found kind of odd. They then had dinner, settled in for the evening, and made their plans for the next day, which was Saturday, September 22nd. It was going to be the second day of their 3-day camping and hunting trip. They got up Saturday morning. However, this day they didn't actually go out into the wilderness till around 4 p.m. For whatever reason, despite Jeffrey getting lost the day before, they again split up and went their separate ways. After splitting up, Jeffrey at some point texted his brother Jason, telling him that he still had not seen any deer and that the plan was they were going to try on the opposite side of the road and hunt into the evening hours. Sadly, Jason had no idea that that was the last text he would ever receive from his brother. Once the twilight time period had passed and the real darkness had set in, somehow Jeff got turned around again and got lost trying to make his way back to the campground. At this time, his friend Daryl had picked up some other hunters that he had run into, was in his truck, and he was giving them a ride back to their campground. He noticed that he had a missed call from Jeff as well as a voicemail. He played the voicemail. He played it on speakerphone. According to later testimonies by these hunters that were in the vehicle, it sounded like Jeffrey was shouting, speaking very loud, as though he didn't have very good reception. Between 8 p.m. and 8:24 p.m., Jeffrey made 5 more calls to Daryl, telling him that he was lost and saying to honk his horn. At this point, Jeffrey fired his rifle twice into the air to try and help Daryl locate his position better. Both Daryl and other hunters heard the shots, thinking that based on the sound, he couldn't be more than 500 yards away. All his family and friends would later say 500 yards should have been nothing for him to be able to find his way out, and that something else must have been going on. By 8:30 p.m., all of Jeffrey's phone calls to Daryl had stopped. Daryl continued along the road, honking his horn, and went to the area where he knew Jeffrey had originally entered the forest. He never did, however, get out of his vehicle to actually look for Jeffrey. It wasn't until roughly 10:20 p.m., almost 2 hours after he received the last phone call from Jeffrey, that he contacted 911. Here is part of that call.
All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and get a deputy on the way out there. And I'm going to try to make contact with this guy too.
This next part is a little unclear, but apparently, according to most sources, while he was trying to call his friend Daryl, he had also made several calls to the Wilkes County 911 center. The calls kept getting interrupted because there was poor reception. They were trying to get a location on him, but they couldn't. At roughly 11 p.m., 2 Wilkes County Sheriff's Office deputies had arrived on the scene. They were starting to talk with Daryl, trying to figure out where Jeffrey might be. They weren't having any luck with the initial ground search, so around midnight, they brought in a special helicopter equipped with infrared heat locating camera. After over 2 hours of searching with the helicopter, they finally spotted what they thought possibly could be Jeffrey, and they sent in the ground search and rescue teams, which included rangers from the Department of Natural Resources, various deputies from the Wilkes County Sheriff's Office. It wasn't until around 3 a.m. that Sunday morning, September 23, 2012, when the ground teams got to the spot that the helicopter had pinpointed, and what they found was just beyond shocking. Jeffrey Gebhardt was lying on his back with his arms across his chest in this tall grass in this marshy area, very muddy, but it appeared to them that he was covered in blood. They quickly realized that Jeffrey was deceased, and they just were completely dumbfounded. How could this have happened? What could have happened? The next day, when it was light out, they brought in more investigators, more people to try and figure out what had happened. They found that the position that he was lying in was very awkward, with his arms across his chest. His ghillie suit was fully unzipped. There was blood on his t-shirt. They just really had no idea what had happened, but they did see that there was numerous wounds all over his chest. He had bruising on his legs. They noticed that he had a very jagged cut on his right hand between his thumb and forefinger. His 2 rifles were lying by the side of him. All his gear was lying there. His wallet was found with all the money in it, his ID. Nothing had been taken. They could also see he had a rather large bruise on one side of his head. He had various scrapes on his neck and a lot of other cuts and bruises. Police at this time were just completely baffled. By the way, these are all pictures from the actual investigation. Jeffrey's own hunting knife was found underneath him. Here's a picture of that. It was partially opened. It was one of those knives where you have to press a button to open. As you can see, there's really no marking or blood on it. The police initially went to the suspect that they thought had to be involved, his friend Daryl. Here's part of those interviews.
When was the last time you saw him? Yesterday.
The last time I saw him was when I dropped him off to go hunting.
And that would have been after 4 o'clock.
Right. He said he was in tall grass, and I thought he was saying something about a fence, and then he said something about mud. So we ride down the road, and we never did see him on the road anywhere, and that's when I called 911.
Ultimately, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation got involved. They also interviewed Daryl. They also got many warrants. They got a warrant to search Daryl's things. They also got a warrant to search the camper that they were both staying in to see if there was any signs of any type of a struggle. At the beginning of the investigation, all the deputies and the CBI were basically set on the fact that Daryl was the perpetrator. That was until the autopsy was performed. The autopsy was performed that Monday, September 24th. They were still pretty set on the fact that the manner of death was homicide, but that all changed very quickly. During the medical examiner's report, they stated that he had over 17 stab or puncture wounds. He had that cut on the webbing between your thumb and forefinger on his right hand. Jeff was right-handed, so they didn't understand how that could have happened. He had no drugs or alcohol in his system, plus he was not known to be a drinker anyway. There were 3 main wounds in and around the heart area, and then another deep one in his abdomen. The investigators really pushed his friend Daryl for answers because he was the last person known to see Jeffrey. Plus, all of Jeffrey's items were at the scene, so they knew it wasn't a robbery. Daryl stuck to his story, though. He said he had no idea what happened, and based on his friends and family's view and what he said, he was displaying odd behaviors. At Jeffrey's funeral, he wouldn't talk to Jeffrey's parents about the last phone calls that he had with Jeffrey or any other details. Despite Daryl displaying these odd behaviors, there was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime, so he was eventually cleared. Weeks into the investigation, the investigators were more and more stumped until they found these set of footprints that were in the area. And there was only one set of footprints. These are the actual footprints, which they measured and all determined to be Jeffrey's. So at this point, because of the footprints and no other evidence suggesting that anybody else was there, they came to the conclusion that Jeffrey had done this to himself, and they changed the manner of death to suicide, which of course just was outrageously appalling to his friends and family and everyone. Even when I first read this, I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. His mom was a registered nurse. She said she never saw any signs of any type of depression. In fact, all of his family and friends said that he was the happiest that he had been in a long time. He had so much to look forward to, so much going for him. Not to mention the manner in which they found him, lying on top of this half-closed knife with 17 plus wounds. I mean, even these examiners that have been working cases for years that were brought in to look at this case said that they can't believe that would be possible. Just because they only found that one set of footprints in and around the actual scene, what about the area surrounding it, all that tall grass and the woods? It possibly could have occurred there, and then he just walked into that area. Who knows? But the whole thing is just mind-boggling. But the Georgia Bureau of Investigation held a special session where they upheld the ruling and they closed the case. This, of course, was devastating to his friends and family, and they're still looking for answers. But because the case is closed, there's really no more investigation. Although the GBI did say that if further evidence comes about, they would be willing to reopen the case. I want to dedicate this video to Jeffrey Sean Gebhardt, his family, his friends, all his loved ones, and I hope and pray that you will get the answers that you're looking for. I definitely would love to hear from all of you, your thoughts on this case. Thank you all for watching, all your support, your comments, your feedback. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me to the end. Please leave me comments on what you think about this case. I think it's just absolutely crazy. I mean, think that someone would pass out before they were able to inflict that many wounds on themselves and then land in the position with your arms crossed over your chest. I think it's possible that maybe someone attacked him from behind him, like unsuspectingly. I agree with his parents that say that they believe that his friend isn't telling the whole story. Maybe he wasn't involved, but possibly knows more. I didn't use his real name because he has been cleared by the authorities. However, I do think that there is more to the story. Who knows? To me, there's just so many things that don't add up. Please leave me your feedback on what you think. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. It's free and it really helps out the channel a lot. If you have any video or case suggestions or would like to donate to the channel or get into SAR or have any questions, all my information is in the description. Thank you for all your wonderful support. All right, everyone, be safe out there and see you next time.